Wi-Fi in the heart, basically, I mean, clearly more scientific investigation needs to be considered. Clearly, there are children and adults out there with undiagnosed cardiac problems. I mean, even as an adult cardiologist, I would see adult people in their 40s and 50s who have a hole in their heart that was undiagnosed until they went into heart failure. There was an article in the 2008 Journal of Epidemiology that looked at 13,000 children, and more than 10,000 of them had learning disabilities, behavioral problems, ADD, ADHD, and the culprit was wireless technologies. So if you look at some of these wireless technologies, and Ali Johansson, he says cell phones and other wireless are a real danger, and Professor Sanford says the largest human biological experiment ever. I can tell you as a cardiologist, I really agree with that, and I resonate with it because I've seen the damage these things can do. And the problem is, and Magna said this with her whole list, the problem is that you can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't taste it. It's like having an enormous amount of radon right here, so close to your body. The problem here is that with children and adults with these undiagnosed situations, now you bring them into an environment that could adversely affect the heart. Could anything happen? So we have to ask our question. Can Wi-Fi or any form of toxic RF set the stage for a life-threatening arrhythmia in a vulnerable individual? That's the question we have to ask. Now, do we want to wait for decades of research as we did with the tobacco industry? I mean, the tobacco industry fought that for years, and the jury is out on that, okay, tobacco causes, lung cancer. Radon, everybody's afraid of, and radon is really big in the northeast United States, where I live in Connecticut, as well as Canada. A lot of houses are built on granite rock here, and everybody gets their homes tested for radon. And we know that radon, when it seeps through the earth and into your body, it's a big cause for lung cancer, despite the fact that many patients with lung cancer who are exposed to radon don't smoke. So it took years of research to show that. But when a real estate agent comes to your house and says, do you want it radon checked? Of course you say, yeah, I'll have it checked, Now, radon is like EMF and RF. You can't feel it, you can't taste it, you can't see it, you can't smell it, but it's a silent killer, just like RF is. So we don't want to wait for decades of research. So what do we do now? And my suggestion here is really to use the precautionary principle. Under the precautionary principle, the threat of plausible, serious, and irreversible hazards to children from exposure to particular environmental stimuli justify public policy action to reduce such exposure, even though scientific uncertainty or ignorance may preclude findings of a true hazard. Waiting for such proof may be more damaging to the public health in the long run. And I embrace this principle. This is the principle that I think you guys should be using in Toronto. This is the principle that your legislatures need to follow.
Health Canada sets the limit at 10 million microwatts per meter squared. Now, that might not mean much to most of us, but in 2008, Toronto's Board of Health said it's way too high and asked Canada's Minister of Health in this letter for much stricter regulations, 100 times more strict. Health Canada never changed a thing. Still, no matter what any guideline says, these parents say they've seen it for themselves and Wi-Fi is harming their kids.
So she had to hold on to friends in order not to collapse on the floor.
She had headaches, and we're not talking just regular headaches. They were extreme headaches where the secretary would call me. I'd have to come pick her up.
According to this doctor, there's good reason to believe these kids are telling the truth and not just making up some excuse to skip school.
There's no question in my mind it exists.
Dr. Jennifer Armstrong specializes in environmental medicine.
The big thing with kids is they're more vulnerable.
Why?
Children are more vulnerable. Their skulls are thinner. Their bodies are not as strong as ours in general. They're developing, their brains are developing. So you expose children to radiation and their little bodies don't handle it as well.
And cardiologist Dr. Stephen Sinatra agrees.
As a parent, if I had a young child, would I want to use my child as an experiment to see if it's going to take 30 years or 20 years or 10 years to become sick? No, not me. And the thing is, we have to sacrifice accelerated education and convenience. And basically, we have to look at the safety of our children. We have to do it as a society.
Ava says since Health Canada isn't controlling Wi-Fi, parents are going to have to.
So are you suggesting that parents should tell their kids, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old who may be attached to his laptop or his iPad, you should stop using that?
It may not go over so well, but you know, when children want to smoke, and if you're a responsible parent, you allow your 13-year-old child to smoke. In my mind, there's no difference between the two. If anything, I think maybe microwave radiation is going to show up to be much more harmful than smoking, simply because of the amount of exposure that we're seeing in our everyday environment.
You don't want to wait until you can count the bodies before you tell the public that there is a serious potential of harm. And with regard to the issue of Wi-Fi in schools, this is exactly where we are.